Hello students. So this video discussion is the mock test that you've had 2032104, and we'll be discussing the English language part of that test. So the English language part had one reading comprehension passage which had 8 questions. It had 5 questions which were on para-jumble, that is organizing the sentences to make sense in a paragraph. It had 5 grammar-based questions and 6 fill in the blanks. 6 questions where you filled in blanks in sentences with appropriate words. 5 grammar-based questions where you corrected sentences or identified the correct parts that should replace wrong parts. And then 6 sentences or 6 questions in which you identified spelling errors. So all in all, not a very difficult test, but you do know that it's good preparation and effective reading that helps you handle tests like this. So let's get started then. We'll start with the RC. So the comprehension passage, there was one passage with 8 questions. So let's go over the passage. They called it the Great American Desert. Until the middle of the 19th century, Kansas remained wild and untamed. And for those of you who know a little bit of your map, Kansas is a state in the US, okay, in the mid-US. In the eyes of early explorers, the vast land appeared to be a little more than incorrigible. Incorrigible, you realize, means difficult to understand, unfit for cultivation, and unsuitable for habitation. Unfortunately, for a long time, this expansive part of the Louisiana Purchase. For those of you who know a little bit of your history, the Louisiana Purchase was where a large portion of the southern parts of America were actually purchased by the American, let us say, Republic from the French, because those were French colonies originally. So unfortunately, for a long time, this expansive part of the Louisiana Purchase had been strictly officially closed to any settlement, which means they had not allowed people to settle there. They had not allowed people to go in and start farming or anything there. As a result, the Kansas wilderness was uninitiated to any purpose. So nobody had actually used that vast wild area for any purpose. Only soldiers and surveyors are those who actually survey the land to be able to establish area, size, location, etc. Only soldiers and surveyors, and at times exclusive missionaries. Missionaries, you know, are those people who belong to the church, who were spreading the word of God, or trying to preach to tribes and so on. Those were missionaries. Only soldiers and surveyors, and at times exclusive missionaries, could penetrate this barren, unfamiliar landscape, which means they were the only people who had actually been there. With Kansas and Nebraska open to settlement, so once these places were open to settlement, that means the federal government said people can go there and establish farms, etc. A homesteading fever swept across the country. A homestead is okay, you have to understand a little about the way the American farming community grew. Most of America was populated on the east coast, and then as the country started to expand and a lot of land area in the Midwest and then the far west actually came under American control, the government at some point of time allowed people to go out because they wanted people to spread and not just get congregated on the east coast. They allowed people to go out into the west, identify for themselves land that they could farm, and they could mark off the land and ask for ownership of that land. Now, such a land that a family would mark off and say, we can farm this land, where they would build a home and build a farm and farm that land, was called a homestead. So that is what homesteading is. Okay, homesteading is people going out to kind of mark off places that they could possibly cultivate and build a home on, and ask the governments to, in some sense, allot it to them. So with Kansas and Nebraska open to settlement, a homesteading fever swept across the country. In Kansas alone, there were nearly 50 million acres of virgin grassland for the taking, which means virgin grassland meaning land that had not been cultivated so far. People of all backgrounds and nationalities, rich or poor, were entitled to stake their claims. So they could go out, say, I can farm this land and let me have an allotment for this land. So people of all backgrounds and nationalities, rich or poor, were entitled to stake their claims and own a share of these untried plains. Within months, settlers from the east, the south, the Midwest, and even foreign countries streamed into the prairie heartland. The prairie, of course, is a wide open space with grass, right? No, I mean, not just like a one field, but thousands and thousands of acres of really, really uncultivated land, simply covered with grass. Excited by the cheap land and the new opportunities to be found there, they bravely said goodbye to friends and family and abandoned every routine and comfort of their old lives. Like thousands of other women, Melora SP dash. So you're going to get a question that asks you to fill the blank, right? Of family ties and old friendships for the thrill of the unexpected in Kansas. That means she was willing to give up family ties and old friendships. Despite the anguish of parting, the tedium of the long journey west, pioneers continued to emigrate by covered wagon, horseback, stagecoach, steamboat, railroad, and even on foot. For many pioneers, the water routes proved to be particularly convenient. As migration increased, stagecoach became more popular. A stagecoach is nothing but a closed wagon pulled by 4 or 6 horses. So as migration increased, stagecoach became more popular. The journey was tiring, but also one of adventure and spectacle. In the 1860s, the Kansas Pacific Railroad gave Kansas mileage, which means once they established the railroad, Kansas actually got a lot of people coming in. Authorized as a branch of the Union Pacific being a railroad or a railway company, the Kansas Pacific line was soon chartered to connect Kansas City and Denver, and by 1863 construction was underway. So they were actually building lines through Kansas. Advancing rapidly across the state, slicing straight through haze and across miles of barren Indian country, Indian here being Red Indian, correct? The Native Americans. The Kansas Pacific finally reached Denver by 1870, which means they finally established the railroad across Kansas, right, to connect Kansas and then to Denver in Colorado, by 1870. In its first year of operation, it was discovered that this spanking new means of transportation was not without its perils, which means it did have its own dangers. Stagecoaches and railroad trains were convenient only for the traveler with few possessions in tow, which means if they didn't have too much to carry, then stagecoaches and railroad and trains were okay. The families preferred the covered wagon as it was the most practical and economical means of travel. So here we are not talking about the stagecoach, we're talking about each family having one large rectangular wagon covered with canvas and drawn by 2 horses. The family preferred, so families that actually had possessions didn't choose stagecoaches or railroad trains, they chose the covered wagon. The families preferred the covered wagon as it was the most practical and economical means of travel. Over the years, the prairie schooner, so called because it looked with its long sturdy frame and high white canopy, the high white canopy being the canvas that covered the wagon. So this, with its long sturdy frame and high white canopy, looked like a ship sailing through a sea of grass, and this became a familiar sight on the frontier. So these family wagons, one large wagon, 2 horses with a canvas covered dome, became a familiar sight on the frontier. Beautiful and bountiful, the land was the great lure of Kansas. So everyone was going to Kansas because they really believed that land was where they could build farms. Some settlers sought freedom, some yearned for prosperity, some craved adventure, but in the end it was the promise of the land that drew them halfway across a continent. Here they could build their homes, cultivate their fields, and develop their communities. Undoubtedly, it took a special kind of fortitude meaning strength, right? Courage. It took a special kind of fortitude to adjust to this harsh terrain. Yet with hard work, resourcefulness, and tenacity, the future was theirs to mold. In this new land, God's own country, they reached to the stars through the wilderness. To reach to the stars is to try and aim for improvement in life, to aspire for improvement in their life, and they reached to the stars through the wilderness being the wilderness that they hoped to establish their farms on. So let's just go over this very quickly and recognize what the thought flow here is. So it starts by telling you about the fact that Kansas had remained untapped, uncultivated for a long time. When finally people were allowed to go there to settle, then thousands of people actually moved. That means they left their family and friends and moved to Kansas. They moved by different ways, by different means of transport, but all with the idea of being able to establish farms there in Kansas. And there is mention of one lady here, Melora SP, who also did the same thing. And then it tells you of the different methods of transport that they used: covered wagon, horseback, stagecoach, steamboat, railroad. So, and while stagecoach became popular, it also talks about the fact that the railroad actually finally came into being, in Kansas. But the stagecoach and railroad were fine for people who didn't have too much to carry. But if a family was moving lock, stock and barrel completely, then very clearly they wanted more space than just the stagecoach or the railroad would allow. So the most common and the most practical and most economic means of travel was the covered wagon. And this covered wagon, because it was one wagon covered with a high white canvas canopy, looked so much like a ship with sails, it came to be called the prairie schooner. A schooner, of course, is a sailing ship, and that became a familiar sight in Kansas. But then it says that the land was what people went to Kansas for. Some because they believed that having a farm would give them freedom, some believed that having a farm would give them prosperity, some just the adventure of establishing something new. But in the end, it was actually the land itself that drew them to Kansas. So they could build their homes, cultivate their fields, develop their communities. Yes, it did take a certain kind of strength, but with hard work and with courage, they could build their own future. That is the idea that the passage gives you. So the question should actually be fairly straightforward. Which of the following best describes the author's attitude towards the settlers of Kansas? So obviously the author is actually in some sense very admiring of them. He believes that these people who went to Kansas had courage and they were prepared to put in hard work, they were prepared to take risks to be able to build their future. So he's not surprised. He's certainly not expressing abomination. Abomination is dislike, extreme dislike. He's not expressing extreme dislike. Is he expressing admiration? Yes, he is. Because especially if you look at the last part where he says, undoubtedly it took a special kind of fortitude to adjust to this harsh terrain, yet with hard work, resourcefulness and tenacity, the future was theirs to mold. That means they could make their own future for themselves, and they reached through this wilderness. They were hoping to improve their lives. So very clearly he is in admiration of these people who are willing to take risks, travel all these miles, come to a new place to try and build a life for themselves. It's not exasperation, because exasperation means that you're actually very disgusted with what is happening or with what people are doing. And it's not desperation. He's not desperate. He's actually narrating other people's conditions, and he's narrating it with a certain amount of admiration. So the answer here would definitely be 3, admiration. Moving forward, the conditions that particularly prompted the settlers from the east to the south Midwest to move to the prairie heartland were all the following except, which means there are 5 statements here. So 4 of them are mentioned as attractions of Kansas. 1 is not, or at least 1 is not presented as the reason for people wanting to move. Now, was it the availability of cheap land? Yes. Homesteading. They could actually lay claim to a land, to a parcel of land, and have it allotted to them. The promise of a new life in Kansas? Yes, because they would be starting anew. The mystical spirit of adventure? Yes, some went for the adventure of starting a new life. The courage that enabled them to think that they could mold their own futures? Yes. The availability of fossil fuel? The business of petroleum and crude oil is not even mentioned there. Fossil fuels, would be petroleum, and the discussion of petroleum has not even happened in the passage. So that is not a reason for their movement to Kansas. So 1, 2, 3 and 4 are reasons, but not 5. So the answer would be 5. Question 3. The word prairie schooner clearly refers to the wagon, correct? The covered wagon. So it's not the wild grasslands. It's not the railways. It's not a sailing ship. It's only a metaphor for something that looks like a sailing ship because of its white cover. It's not the stagecoach, which is a closed kind of cabin drawn by 6 coaches and 6 horses, and which people use like a bus, for instance, or a taxi in that sense. The modern day version of the stagecoach would be a large taxi, correct? But it was a wagon that one family would have for itself to carry all its possessions in, and it would be a large wagon covered with canvas, with a canvas dome. So the travel wagon or the covered wagon is what the prairie schooner term refers to. Okay, so the answer there is 3. Why does the author mention Melora SP? Because he presents her as an example of somebody who was willing to go out and meet the hardships in Kansas, isn't it? Someone who was prepared to go out and risk leaving her home, etc., to be able to build a new life in campus. So she's presented as an example. So is it about a woman who was forced to leave her home? No, she chose to go and try and build a new life for herself. Is it as an example of women who dared to meet the hardships in Kansas? Yes, it is. Of people who would like to build a life for themselves. So she's provided as an example of that. Is it simply because this person had family ties and relationships? No, a person is willing to give up her family ties and relationships to build a new life for her. Is it to illustrate the number of people? No, it is to illustrate the type of woman. Is it an example of women who had led secured lives? No, an example of women who was willing to take a risk, who was willing to try adventure, correct? So 2 would be the answer to question 4. What about 5? According to the author, which of the following best suits the author's description of the travel towards the west? Which means the way the person has presented it. How has he presented it? What has he said that move would be? Is it spectacular and arresting? Spectacular and arresting. Spectacular? No, it doesn't. It's not being presented as spectacular. It's just being presented as long journeys that actually had hardships, but had a very clear, advantage that people were looking for in the end. Arresting would mean something that actually holds you by surprise. So we're not looking at that. Is it dramatic and engrossing? Well, there is no drama built into this. There's narration. Is it attractive but venturous? Yes. So the people were looking forward to a objective. They were hoping for a new life there. Everything seemed very attractive in the sense of the fact that they would be able to establish their own farm. So that was the attraction that drew them. But venturous, that means there was adventure involved. Some risk, some adventure. So attractive but venturous would suit the question best. So 3 would be the answer there. Histrionic but stylish. Histrionic means to do with acting. To do with pretense. There is no acting or pretense talked about here. Theatrical and emotional? Certainly not. The person is not presenting drama here. It's not a play. But he is talking about the fact that people were attracted to Kansas with the ideas of being able to build a life for themselves and were willing to, in some sense, engage in some amount of adventure to get there. So attractive but venturous would be the answer to 5. Here, what would be most similar to the word bountiful? Well, bounty means something that you are fortunate to get, something that is good that comes to you, a great amount of benefit that you get. So that would be bountiful. And if it is in large quantity, then you'd say your good fortune came to you in a large measure. So it actually has to do with a large amount of benefit. Basically is bountiful. So it's not fanciful. It's not tortuous. Tortuous is long winding. It's not meager, which is very, very small in quantity. It is certainly plentiful. Okay. So plentiful would be bountiful. Scarce again is very small in quantity, so we are not looking at that. So the answer to 6 would be 4. Just the meaning of the word in the context. What about 7? What would be opposite to the word exclusive? Let's just go back to where exclusive is used. Well, here the person says, correct? So it says only soldiers and surveyors and at times exclusive missionaries. That means only missionaries who were particular to a certain kind of task. Only missionaries who were suited to a particular kind of task. So here exclusive would mean only those and nobody else, right? So what would be opposite to that then? The opposite to that would therefore mean open to everybody. If it's exclusive and you're saying open to only those of a particular kind, and you want some, that means it is closed to everybody else. That's not, if nobody else actually made the entry except these people. But now if you're saying you want the opposite, then it will have to be made available to everybody or open to everybody. And the only word here that tells us open to everybody is not wicked, but it certainly is accessible. Accessible would mean everyone could access it. Not limited, not private, and certainly not naughty. So accessible would be the answer to this question. What about question 8? So filling in that blank based on the information given in your passage. So we are saying gave away security, gave back security, gave up security, gave over security, gave off security. It's only a business of picking the right phrase. Now we know that this statement came to us when they talked about Melora SP, right? So what was Melora SP? What did she have to do? She gave up her, like thousands of other women, she gave up her family ties and she gave up her old friendships for the thrill of traveling to Kansas. So you realize in the previous line it says, excited by the cheap land and the new opportunities to be found there, they bravely said goodbye to friends and family. That means they were able to give up their old life to try and seek a new life. So you need give up. So the term you'd want to look for is gave up. So in 8 we have gave away, no, gave back, no, gave up. So gave up the security of her old friends and family and moved to Kansas, which was an entirely new experience. So gave up the security is what you want in 8. So 3 would be the answer to 8. With that we finished the RC passage and we can move on to the parajumbles. So we have 5 parajumbles from questions 9 to 13, sorry. So 9 to 13 we have parajumbles, isn't it? So 9, 10, 11, 12, 30, right. And each one has 5 sentences and we will put them in order and make a paragraph out of them and pick the right choice. These are made somewhat easy because you actually have the choices that give you sequences. So with a few ideas about the organization, you can actually go down to the choices and eliminate. But if your reading is comfortable, you can probably work out the context and the flow for yourself. So let's try doing this. So 5 bits, all of which make one statement. So let's see. Approve standards of thought and action. Well, that's a noun phrase, approved standards of thought and action, and it could be something that starts a sentence, but let's see. We need to be able to identify the subject and the verb and thereafter the predicate. And in habits of obedience to socially, okay, socially. Now socially has to be followed by something. It can't be socially is gained. It can't be socially orderly conduct. It can't be socially the term discipline refers to, because you're saying and in habits of obedience to socially what? To socially, the only thing that can work here is socially approved standards. So we know that B and A would actually have to be a pair, correct? So we know that B and A are a pair because you're saying and in habits of obedience to socially approved standards of thought and action. So what is and in habits? So is gained through training in self-control. What is gained? What is gained through training in self-control? Well, it can't be approved standards of thought and action is gained, because approved standards would be plural, so it can't be a singular is gained. So something else has to be is gained. Orderly conduct of an individual, which can be followed by what? It can't be which followed by and in habits. It can't be which followed by which the term discipline refers to. It will actually have to be which is gained. So we know that C is actually going to come, let's say, after B and A, isn't it? So you're saying approve standards of thought and action, right? Okay, sorry. So it's not about after C. So D and C work together. So orderly conduct of an individual which is gained. So I know that D and C work together. Okay, so D, C work together. So D and C are a pair. Orderly conduct of an individual which is gained through. What is all this then? The term discipline refers to. Okay, so we've got it. The term discipline refers to a state of orderly conduct, right? So we've got that. So E then is what is going to work with D. Because you realize approved standards may be a noun phrase by itself, but then as you progress, you actually have and in habits of obedience to socially. Socially what? Socially has to be, if socially is an adverb, then the adverb has to in some sense refer to an adjective. So it can only be socially approved standards. And then when you say something is gained, so what is gained? Then you know that orderly conduct of an individual which is gained, right? So D and C have to work together. And then what is all this that is we are referring to? The term discipline. So the term discipline refers to a state of orderly conduct of an individual which is gained through training in self-control and in habits of obedience to socially approved standards of thought and action. So it will have to be EDCBA. Okay, so we worked that out and we got the sequence there. So it will be EDCBA. Okay, so this will be your answer. Okay, moving on to 10 then. A similar process here. Something it to enhance. Obviously it can't. It can't be it to enhance. So you're doing something to it to enhance, isn't it? So it to enhance positive traits like focus and through mediation. Okay, now through mediation we can build up what? You can't build up it. Decision making and diminish the less it? No. Areas of our brain and actually rewire it? Quite right. So that means DNA have to work together. So something about the areas of brain and actually rewire it. That means reorganize our brain. Rewire it. The it is the brain there. So DNA are very clearly connected. So to enhance positive traits like focus and what? Focus and, it can't be focus and through mediation, but it can be focus and decision making, because that's a positive trait. So that means it could be DAC, right? So you have DAC. Now what is that then? So areas of our brain and actually rewire it to enhance positive traits like focus and decision making and diminish the less what? Diminish the less positive ones. Diminish the less positive ones like fear and stress. E would come after that then. So what is this then? So through meditation, through meditation we can build up, fine. So through meditation we can build up a decision, what should we say? Through meditation we can build up areas of our brain and actually rewire it to enhance positive traits like focus and decision making and diminish the less positive ones like fear and stress. So BDACE is your answer to this one. It was not difficult at all, fairly straightforward. What about the 11th one? So while the interest of all sections has been taken into consideration, okay, while the interest of all sections, it could go from A to B, while the interest of all sections have been taken into consideration, budget's provisions have been, well, provisions have to be made. So it would be ABC then. Budget provisions have been made for the development of infrastructure. Infrastructure is mainly, no, for the development of infrastructure facilities, quite right. So it will have to go from A to B to C to D to E. Right? So it would be, while the interest of all sections has been taken into consideration, budget provisions have been made for the development of infrastructure facilities for self-sufficient Madhya Pradesh, and focus is mainly on education, health and good governance, right? So that makes sense. So you realize your E will come before D, correct? That's all you need to do to this particular one, because if you had E here, that makes absolute sense. Just read it once. While the interest of all sections has been taken into consideration, so that's AB. Budget provisions have been made, so that's ABC, for the development of infrastructure facilities for self-sufficient Madhya Pradesh, so that's ABCDE. And focus is mainly on, and therefore D comes at the end, and focus is mainly on education, health and good governance. So this was not too difficult. See, how you tackle this is, you actually recognize the connections between the bits. So when you have a standard phrase, has been taken as a standard phrase, okay, have been made as a standard phrase. Then when you say is mainly, what is mainly, then you know focus is mainly. So when you see the connected, the beginnings and ends of each section, and you see the connections between them, in terms of standard sentence structure, it becomes very easy to handle these. Okay, so that's 11 for you. Let's look at the 12th one. Written more than 75 books on wide ranging. Who has written? Somebody must have written. So someone should have written these books. So who could that someone be? So as an author and poet, this person is obviously the one who's written the book. As an author and poet, the union, okay, then straight away when you say the union, you know you have to go down to the education minister. So B and D are very clearly related. Okay, so B and D are very clearly related. So as an author and poet, the union education minister has what? Has not issues, has not into, but has written. So it will have to come to A. So it will be BDA. Correct? So, as an author and poet, the Union Education Minister has written more than 75 books on wide-ranging what? On wide-ranging issues, okay, which have also been translated into what? Translated into many national. So translated also has to be followed by into, isn't it? So BDACE is going to be your sequence. So as an author and poet, the Union Education Minister. See, your connections are fairly clear here. When you say written, somebody should have written. Who is the somebody? The Union Education Minister has written. So it has to be BDA. And then 75 books on topics, isn't it? Or on issues. So C has to follow A. And then if they've been translated, then they have to be translated into many national and foreign languages. So BDACE is going to be your choice. Fair enough? And then the last of these, to have reconciled to the fact, what someone has to have reconciled. To have reconciled is in the present perfect. So somebody needs to have reconciled. Who's the somebody? We don't know yet. That higher yields are here to. Now obviously when you say are here to, there's a standard phrase, are here to stay. You know, when you say that something is here almost as a permanent feature, you say that it's here to stay. So that means B has to work with C. Okay? So B has to work with C, we know that. Now the Reserve Bank of India. The Reserve Bank of India seems what? Seems to. If you have a seems, it has to be followed by to. So the RBI seems to have reconciled to the fact. So it has to be DA. Okay. So the RBI seems to, sorry, this is not BA, this has to be BC. Okay. So that higher yields are here to stay. So that's BC. So the Reserve Bank of India seems to have reconciled to the fact what? Then if you say the fact, then it has to be the fact that. So then it would go from D to A to B. So the Reserve Bank of India seems to have reconciled to the fact that. When you say the fact, what fact? The fact that higher yields are here to stay as it bought bonds at near market rates after many months. As it bought bonds at some rates. So it bought bonds at near market rates. So C would actually be followed by E. So it will be DA, BC, E. Correct? So DA, BC, E would be your sequence in this question. Fine? So that's 13. Not very difficult, isn't it? So these were not paragraph jumbles, they were sentence jumbles. They were bits put together to form one large sentence. Recognizing the standard grammatical connections that you normally make in a phrase, you can recognize where the phrase continues into another line. So it's quite easy to do. So, I mean, just exercise your recognition of sentence structure and you should be able to handle these. So this one, the answer would be D, A, B, C, E. Fine. So that brings us to the next set of questions. This one is about filling in blanks. Starting from sentence 14, we need to fill in blanks with the right word. So let's have a look at that. 14. The small lively birds in the garden dash from one branch to the other, which means they were flying around and they flew from one branch to the other. Now you want a word here for flew. Now dithered is not flying, enunciated is not flying, flitted when something moves very quickly from one place to the other, and it could be flying also, and typically flying. So birds flit from one branch to the other. So that would be your answer. It can't be dawdled because dawdled is about doing something with delay. And it can't be lingered because you linger at a place. You don't linger from one place to another. You linger at a place. To linger is to stay on at a place. So very clearly the answer here should be flitted. To flit between things is to fly very quickly between them. Alright. What does dithered mean? To dither is to hesitate. To hesitate, you don't hesitate from one branch to the other. Enunciated. To enunciate is to pronounce your sounds properly. So certainly we are not talking about pronunciation here. Flitted, I've told you, is about flying very quickly from one place to the other. Dawdled is to delay. So if they were lively birds, they would not be delaying, and you don't delay from one branch to another. You can only delay at a certain place. You delay leaving, then you dawdle. Lingered is to stay on at a particular place. So you don't say lingered from one branch to the other. So the answer here would be flitted. Let's look at 15. From the dawn of mankind, when humans first dash skyward. So obviously you look skyward. You look skyward, isn't it? to seek the answers of life to the modern age. That means they wondered where the answers were and whether they can learn the answers from the stars or whether God will give them the answers. So from the dawn of mankind, when humans first obviously looked skyward to see the answers of life to the modern age, the land of India has excited a fascination for civilized man. So it can't be the humans grabbed skyward. Grab would mean to suddenly reach out and hold it in your hand. It could be peered skyward, because when you look very carefully to see whether you can, identify certain things in a certain place, then you're peering at it. So it could be peered skyward. And would it be plunged skyward? No, to plunge is to drop towards something. Tumbled, to fall down. To lunge, to make a very quick movement towards something. So we're not talking about people trying to make a movement towards the sky or falling down into the sky or tumbling into the sky. It is about looking towards the sky, and looking keenly to be able to identify things would mean that they peered skyward. So what you want here is peered. Okay. 16. The budget for the year 21-22 comes as an economic vaccine for the pandemic battered economy, and to steer India with the much needed something to boost demand and consumer confidence. Now, if you want to boost demand and you want to build consumer confidence, then you have to provide them with something to boost that demand. You provide them with something to boost that demand. So what would actually prompt something positive? You want something that would prompt a positive result. And therefore the word actually has to be stimulus, isn't it? With the much needed stimulus. So a stimulus is going to cause positive result. That's what a stimulus does. To cause people to get into action, to cause people to start activity again, to cause people to want to get into the economic, let's say, functions again, is a much needed stimulus. It can't be a deterrent, because a deterrent would mean to stop people from. So you can't have a deterrent to boost demand. A deterrent would mean that you want to kill demand. It can't be a bridle, because a bridle is going to control things. A bridle is what they put around a horse's head to be able to control the horse. So a bridle is going to actually control demand. But here we are talking about boosting demand. Similarly, a halter also is something that helps you control an animal. So you don't want to control demand. Tether is to keep demand where it is, to tie it to a pole with a rope and not allow it to move. So that means to keep something in a fixed place is to tether it. So no, we are talking about what would prompt demand to grow. So you need a stimulus to boost demand. So the answer would be stimulus. What about 17? An interdisciplinary team. You know what interdisciplinary means, no? That means scientists from different fields. So this team has now shown that in the Venus flytrap plant, the electrical signals dash measurable magnetic fields to catch its prey. The electrical signals dash measurable magnetic fields to catch its prey. So that means the plant is catching its prey, and electrical signals cause something to happen. They cause the magnetic fields. You want a word to say that they cause the magnetic fields. So it can't be saturate, because to saturate would mean to fill to a point where you can't fill anymore. It can be generate, because generate is to create or to cause. It can't be to insinuate. To insinuate is to gently hint at something, to provide people with ideas in a very mild manner is to insinuate. It can't be to intimate, because to intimate is to inform people of detail. It can't be to placate, because placate would mean to bring about calmness or peace. So here we are talking about creating or causing. So the electrical signals create or cause magnetic fields. So the word you want here is generate. Okay. So 17, the answer would be generate. And 18, the commander of the regiment was dashed by the bravery of the young cadet who saved the wounded soldier lying in the opponent's territory. So there was a young cadet, which means a trainee, who actually in the battlefield saved a wounded soldier. So the commander of the regiment must have been very appreciative of that. He must have been very appreciative. So it can't be, let's say, the commander of the regiment was what? It has to be astonished, because if you're saying that he was taken by surprise at the bravery of a trainee, it can't be abated, because abated would mean that something goes back. It can be astonished, because it means he was taken by surprise. It can't be hindered, because hindered means that he was blocked or stopped. And it can't be explained, because you don't say was explained. He might have explained the bravery to somebody else, but Here it was not he was explained. It can't be explicated because that is the same as explained. So explicated is also explained in great detail. So we are saying here that the commander of the regiment was surprised, or he was taken by surprise. So it will actually have to be he was astonished. So the answer to 18 would be 2, astonished. Right? Sorry. So what about 19 then? The dash remark of the professor annoyed the already depressed student who had failed in one subject. So you have a student who's already sad because he's failed in one subject, and then the remark makes a professor makes a remark that annoys this. So the remark must have been something that troubled the student. It must have been something that troubled the student. So it can't be an emotional remark, because that would mean the professor was also concerned. It can't be a poignant remark, because that means the professor was greatly saddened. Poignant is something that actually causes sadness. It could be a sardonic remark, because a sardonic remark is where a person is mocking somebody or being a little sarcastic. It can't be a pleasant remark. If it was a pleasant remark, it would not have annoyed the student. And it can't be a delirious remark, because a delirious remark is one that a person makes when their mind is in a fevered state and they don't know what they're saying. So when a person is ill and is not aware of what he or she is saying, then they are delirious. So we are not talking about that. So we are talking about the professor probably was mocking the student. So the sardonic remark annoyed the student. So 3 would be the answer to 19. Okay. So that leads us to the grammar questions. Let's have a look at those. So this is about finding which the correct sentence is. One sentence is grammatically correct. So the way you do it is you read there are 4 sentences, and the 5th was none of them is correct. So you read the first sentence, understand what the person is trying to say, and then recognize what the error is and compare it with the other statements to know which the correct one is going to be. So change will come when we least expect it, and to deal with unexpected change requires the personal skill and the will to enter the unknown. Okay? Change will come when we least expect it, and to deal with unexpected change requires the personal skill and the will to enter the unknown. Now, do we say the personal skill? No, we say it requires personal skill. So, because of the personal skill here, we don't need that. We normally say requires personal skill. 2 says change will come when we least expect it, and to deal with the unexpected change. Now we are talking about change in an abstract sense as a situation, and so we are not talking about any particular unexpected change. We are talking about the state of change. So it will have to be to deal with unexpected change, not the unexpected change. Requires personal skill and the will to enter the unknown. Fine, but I don't need the over here. I just need and to deal with unexpected change. Now 3 says change will come when we least expect it, and to deal with the unexpected change again requires the personal skill and wills. No, it has to be the will. So it can't be wills. And 4 says change will come when we least expect it, and to deal with the unexpected change again, right, requires the personal skill. Again, I've got the personal skill. I don't need the personal skill, I just need personal skill and the will to enter the unknown. So to enter, it has to be the unknown. So the is missing over here. So that means all of them have errors. 1 has an error in saying the personal skill. 2 has an error in saying the unexpected change. 3 has the unexpected change and it also has wills. 4 has the unexpected change. It also has the personal skill and it has no the before unknown. And you need the before the unknown. And therefore the answer here would be 5, because none of these statements is actually correct. Okay, let's look at 21. Again, one of them may be wrong or all of them may be wrong, in which case the answer would be 5. Due, innate and learned dispositions. It can't be due, it has to be due to. So very clearly 1 is out. So 1 is out because you need due to. So let's look at 2. Due to being innate and learned dispositions? No. Due to some dispositions. So it can't be due to being. Correct? It can't be due to being innate and learned dispositions. So due to innate and learned dispositions, that's fine. Due to innate and learned dispositions, individuals are biased towards specific types of behavioral responses to stimuli. Okay, so we could look at that. Due to innate and learned dispositions, individuals are biased towards specific types of behavioral responses to stimuli. Fine. So let's keep 3 there. It looks fine. What about 4? Due to innate and learned dispositions, individuals is biased? No, it can't be individuals is biased. It will be individuals are biased. So which means 3 is actually the correct statement here. So the answer would be 3. What about 22? Optimizing oxygenation prior to the use? No, it has to be prior to the use. So because we don't have a 2 here, then 1 is wrong. It's always prior to, not just prior. Optimizing oxygenation prior to the used atropine? No, prior to the used atropine. It has to be prior to doing something. So it has to be prior to the use of. It can't be prior to the used. Okay, so 2 is also wrong. 3 says optimizing oxygenation prior to the use of atropine, alright, is recommended minimize. No, it has to be is recommended to minimize. So you don't have a 2 here. So that means 3 is wrong. Then 4. Optimizing oxygenation prior to the use of atropine is recommended to minimize the potential dysrhythmias. To minimize the potential dysrhythmias? If you're going to minimize the possibility of something happening. So if you weaken the potential dysrhythmias, that's something. But if you're going to minimize, you're actually going to say you're minimizing the chances of something happening. So it will actually be to minimize the potential for dysrhythmia. So you need a 4 there, which means 4 is also wrong. And therefore 5 is your answer, none is correct. Do remember, we're not talking about if you're minimizing something, then you have to minimize the number of them, or you have to minimize the chances of them. So to minimize the potential for dysrhythmias, right? And dysrhythmias, of course, it explains to you what that means: abnormality in the activity of the brain or the heart. So 4 is your answer. I mean, not 4, 5 is your answer, because there are no correct statements in that lot. Okay, 23 then. Curriculum is a standards-based sequences? No, it can't be a standard-based sequences. It will have to be a standard-based sequence. So 1 is wrong. Then 2 says curriculum are a standard-based sequence. If it's a standard-based sequence, then it can't be curriculum are. It has to be curriculum is, because we're talking about curriculum as a concept, isn't it? We're not talking about particular curriculum or curriculums. We're talking about curriculum as a concept. So curriculum is a standard-based sequence. So let's look at 3 then. Now 3 says curriculum is, fine, a standards-based sequence, fine, of planned experiences, okay, where students practice and achieve proficiency in content and applied learning skills. They achieve proficiency in content and applied learning skills. So 3 seems okay. Let's look at 4. Curriculum are a standard-based sequences? No. Again, that's exactly what we have as a problem, because it's not a standard-based sequences. It has to be a standard-based sequence. So this has to be curriculum is. So which means 3 is the correct statement here. So 4 is wrong and 3 is the correct statement. Curriculum is a standard-based sequence of planned experiences where students practice and achieve proficiency in content and applied learning skills. Fine. 24. Tone of the voice as well as situation and relationship factors influence the interpretation of the message. Tone of the voice as well as situational and relationship factors influence the interpretation of the message. But you know, when you use as well as, that's a preposition, it's not a conjunction. So then the subject will have to be tone of the voice, and that can't go with a plural influence, it will have to be influences. Fine? Because as well as is not the same thing as and. If it's a tone of the voice and situation and relationship factors, then I would say influence. But when you say as well as, then the subject is tone of the voice and that remains singular. So tone of the voice as well as situation and relationship factors, but the tone of the voice remains singular, influences the interpretation of the message. So this is correct. Okay. What about 3? tone of the voice as well as situational and relationship factors influences the interpretation of the message. Okay, let's have a look at what's the differences between 2 and 3. Tone of the voice as well. Okay, 3 doesn't have as well as, so there's no as over here, which is why 3 is wrong. So 1 is wrong and 3 is wrong. And 4, tone of the voice as well, again you don't have an as, there is no as here, and therefore 4 is also wrong, which means the only correct one here is 2. Tone of the voice as well as situation and relationship factors influences the interpretation of the message. Fine. So 2 then is your answer. So that finishes the sentence correction statements, and we are now down to the last few questions which talk about where do you identify a spelling error. So let's have a look at those. So as you can see in the directions, the sentence has 4 words in bold type. One of these 4 words is wrongly spelled, maybe wrongly spelled. If they are all correct, then mark all correct, otherwise identify the one that is wrongly spelled. Okay. So according to an author, the purpose of a novel is to exhilarate readers and leave them with happy thoughts. Now author, A-U-T-H-O-R, is spelled correctly. Novel, N-O-V-E-L, is spelled correctly. Exhilarate, it has to be A-R-A-T. So to exhilarate someone is to excite them, is to give them excitement. So here you have a wrong spelling. It will actually be exhilarate, which is A, okay, and therefore 3 is wrong. Thoughts, of course, we know the spelling of thoughts is correct. So here the answer is 3. What about 26? The league broke up and the mainland cities of the Veneto returned to their own accord to their allegiance to Saint Mark. Now a league is a whole group, we know, and over here we're talking about a group of cities. So the league, L-E-A-G-U-E, is correct. Mainland is not by the sea but inland, so mainland cities, that is okay. Accord, agreement, so A-C-C-O-R-D is okay. Allegiance, so it will be A-L-A-L-L-E. It has to be A-L-L-E-G-I-E-N-C. So that is wrong. And so in 26, 4 is wrong. Then in 27, fish spawns during a specified period of the year which coincides with the several environmental factors that are available during the said period only. Now the word spawns actually is S-P-A-W-N-S. Okay, so this is wrong. So that part is wrong. Coincide is okay. Environmental is okay. Available is okay. So what you have here is fish spawns. Also let's remember that in this case the grammar would tell you that fish here we're looking at the entire collective. We're not looking at one fish. So if I'm looking at one fish, I'll say a fish spawns, S-P-A-W-N-S. But if I'm saying fish, then it will have to be fish spawn, S-P-A-W-N. In any case, it is that one which is wrong. So 1 is the wrong one here, and that's your answer. 28. Helen Keller opines that when we are in buoyant health, death is all but unimaginable. So Helen Keller had the opinion, so when she expressed the opinion, she opines. So opines is fine in her writings, in her books. When you're in buoyant health, okay, so actually the spelling in buoyant, B-O-U-Y, is wrong. It has to be B-U-O-Y. Buoyant health, so needs to be B-U-O-Y, not B-O-U-Y. So that is the error. Death, of course, is D-A-T-H, we know. Unimaginable, the spelling is absolutely right. So the answer to this is 2. You do know who Helen Keller is, no? A little bit of general knowledge here. Helen Keller was a lady who was born in 1880, died in 1968. She was blind and deaf from the time she was 1 or 1.5 years old. But she got educated and she did a lot of work for, let us say, welfare of the blind and the deaf. Okay, so a lot of schools for deaf and dumb people are actually called Helen Keller schools. Okay, you do know about that, I suppose. So anyway, that's a little bit of general knowledge for you. Opine is to present an opinion. Buoyant, spelled correctly, B-U-O-Y, would mean in cheerful health. So when you're cheerful, death is all but unimaginable. You don't quite imagine death. So 28, the answer would be 2. What about 29? Fluorescent lights have a variety of great advantages over lighting technology, over old lighting technology. Fluorescent lights have a variety of great advantages over old lighting technology. Fluorescent lights have a variety of great advantages over old lighting technology. Now, this is a little difficult, but you do know that the spelling of fluorescent should be U-O, not O-U. Sorry, one sec. Let me get my pen back. So the spelling should be U-O and not O-U. Okay, so this one is wrong. So 1 is wrong. And these have a variety of great advantages, fine. Over old lighting technology is fine. So 1 is the answer to 29. And then finally we come down to 30. The state governor gave a figurine with the Rotary Club symbol, as a memento to the president. So the memento here is something that is to remind someone of his association with somebody else. But it's not called a memento, it's called a memento. So the spelling here is M-E-N. So what is wrong here is 4. So the fourth one is wrong, it should be memento. So with this we've looked at the spellings as well. Spellings, a lot of people are sometimes confused about spellings. So when you come across a word and you're not sure, it's best to just close your eyes and remember the word when you last read it. Just try and write it in your head and you'll normally get the spelling right if you have a decent reading habit. Pay attention to new words when you see them so that you can in some sense recall their spelling. But typically you know a word and you're sometimes confused about the spelling. The best is to close your eyes, spell it in your head, and you'll actually get the spelling right. So it works that way. So with that we finished this particular paper. Hopefully it was helpful, the discussion. But do remember, if you have a decent reading habit, then all of this actually gets solved, because your reading helps you recognize words, know their meanings, work out grammatical structure, work out thought process, and obviously deal with reading comprehension. So please ensure that you keep reading something every day, right down till your test. Utilize that to build all the different skills. All the best and